I knew something was wrong the moment I heard the applause. It moved through the auditorium like a warm tide meant for everyone but me. And for a split second, I felt the strangest sensation, like I was standing inside someone else's moment, someone else's life. Then I heard my name echo out, sharp and clear, and all that borrowed warmth vanished. 3 empty seats in the front row stared up at me like an accusation I'd been trying to outrun for years. Quick reminder, most of you aren't subscribed. If you're enjoying this, please hit subscribe. It's free, and I only need about 110 more to reach my first 1,000. Your support means a lot. My name is Caroline Hart. I'm 28, and for most of my life I've clung to the idea that being the reliable one would eventually make me seen. I worked my way through community college, then night classes, then the long crawl to a degree I paid for shift by shift. I grew up in a small Connecticut town, where my family treated responsibility like oxygen, something I was expected to supply for everyone but myself. Still, I woke that graduation morning with something stupid and hopeful fluttering in my chest. Today, I thought, maybe they'll show up. I brewed cheap coffee in a quiet apartment, sunlight barely slipping through the blinds. My cap and gown hung crookedly on the closet door like a promise I wasn't sure I deserved. I slipped into my only pair of heels, the ones I bought secondhand for job interviews, and checked my phone so many times it felt like part of my outfit. No texts, no, we're on our way, or where should we park? Just the silence I'd grown up rearranging into excuses. As I drove across town, my phone buzzed not with the message I needed, but with chatter from the family group thread. Photos of my mom's perfectly staged Super Bowl spread, my dad joking about the odds, my brother hyping up a bet he absolutely couldn't afford. The celebration they did have time for was happening in real time, and none of them mentioned the one thing I'd spent 6 years fighting to reach. Still, I told myself a story I knew too well. They'll come. They always come in their own way. Hope can be a dangerous talent. The auditorium overflowed with color and laughter, balloons bobbing, bouquets wrapped in bright cellophane, families taking pictures that would become the kind of memories I'd never had. Ushers led me to my row, where 3 seats bore my last name in crisp black lettering. Seats meant for parents who weren't even pretending to try. I smoothed my gown, forced myself to breathe, and sat down. When the lights dimmed, I whispered one last fragile wish. Maybe they're on their way. Maybe they'll slip in late. Then my phone lit up with another photo from home, the TV blasting pre-game commentary, my dad lifting a beer toward the camera like a toast to everything except me. When I crossed the stage, the applause soared. But it wasn't for me, not really. It was for the idea of achievement, for families cheering themselves hoarse, for pride I had never tasted. I smiled for the dean, shook his hand, and felt something inside me tilt. Not break. Not yet. Just tilt. It didn't break until the parking lot. The cold hit first, a slap of February wind sharp enough to make my eyes sting. But the tears that followed weren't from the cold. I made it to the back row of cars before my legs folded and I sank onto the curb, clutching my diploma like it was proof I hadn't imagined the whole day. My phone buzzed again, my mother grinning beside a tray of wings, my father shouting over the TV, my brother posing like he'd earned something. Not one of them wrote, "How did it go? Care?" Not one of them asked if I'd made it across the stage. The quiet ache inside me finally cracked open, and everything I'd held back for years poured through. I cried the kind of tears that don't make sound, just pressure releasing after too much time spent pretending it didn't hurt. By the time the lot emptied, something new had taken shape inside me. Not bitterness, not even anger, something sharper. A clarity that felt both terrifying and true. Then my phone buzzed again. Aunt Lydia. Saw the ceremony photos online. Proud of you, sweetheart. Call me when you can. Just like that, someone had seen me. Someone who wasn't obligated. Someone who wasn't asking for anything. Her words landed soft but weighty, like an anchor in a storm. I stared at my diploma resting on my lap. My family hadn't bothered to show up for the biggest moment of my life. So why was I still trying to show up for theirs? I opened a travel app, something I'd used to daydream during late-night shifts, never believing I'd actually follow through. My thumb hovered over a bookmarked trip, a wellness retreat in Colorado I'd saved during a moment of impossible longing. "No one's coming to save you," a quiet voice inside me said. "For once, choose yourself." My finger moved before fear could talk me out of it. A one-way ticket. Purchased. Confirmed. For the first time in my life, my escape wasn't a fantasy. It was a boarding pass. And I had no idea that choosing myself just once was about to cost me far more than disappointment. It would uncover the truth they hoped I'd never find. I didn't expect Colorado to feel like another planet, but when the plane dipped over the mountains, something in me loosened like I'd been holding a breath since childhood without ever noticing. Snow glazed the peaks in soft white, stretching toward a sky so shockingly blue it made my ribs ache. For the first time in years, I wasn't bracing for someone to need something from me. I'm Caroline Hart, 28 years old, daughter of a family who taught me that love was a currency I owed them. But sitting there, forehead pressed to the airplane window, I let myself imagine a life where choosing myself wasn't an act of rebellion. A life where silence wasn't a punishment, but a beginning. The retreat smelled like cedar and warm citrus, the kind of scent that made you feel like you'd stepped into a version of your life where rest wasn't a luxury. At check-in, the woman behind the desk smiled with genuine softness. "Welcome, Caroline. We're glad you're here. No expectations, no subtle guilt, just welcome." My room overlooked a frozen lake that caught the afternoon light like a sheet of glass. I stood by the window until the sun disappeared, letting my shoulders fall inch by inch. For a moment, I convinced myself this was just a pause, a week to breathe before returning to Connecticut and the role I'd always played. But the illusion shattered the next morning. After a massage, I checked my phone out of habit. 15 missed messages, 13 from my family. "Mom, can you spot us a few hundred dads short on a bill? Mason lost his card again, you know how it is." A steady stream of taking disguised as emergencies. Not a single one said congratulations or asked how the ceremony went. Then one message appeared that froze everything inside me. "Aunt Lydia. Honey, check your credit report. Now." My stomach dropped so fast I had to sit down. When I opened the app, the truth hit like cold water. I didn't recognize half the accounts. Store cards I'd never opened. A personal loan I'd never signed. Inquiry after inquiry lined up like footprints leading directly back to the people who were supposed to care about me. The dates matched every urgent request they'd made in the past month. They hadn't just leaned on me, they'd taken pieces of my future and used them like spare change. The room suddenly felt too small, the air too thin. I gripped the phone until my fingers hurt, but beneath the fear rising like a tide, something else began to move, slow, steady, impossible to ignore. Recognition. This wasn't neglect. It wasn't forgetfulness. It wasn't even disappointment. It was betrayal. When I called Aunt Lydia, my voice was calm in a way that scared me. She didn't gasp or lecture or act shocked. Instead, she spoke with a quiet seriousness that told me she'd suspected the truth long before I had. "You need a lawyer, sweetheart," she said. "Someone who knows exactly how to deal with this." Her certainty landed like a map placed into my hands. For years, guilt had shaped every choice I made. But now, something sharper guided me. Something that felt like self-respect, even if I wasn't brave enough yet to name it. I flew back to Connecticut with a folder thick with documents the lawyer Carmen told me to gather. Every statement, every inquiry, every scrap of proof of how my family had built their comfort on the erosion of my life. I stared out the plane window the entire way, clouds drifting beneath us like soft lies. My hands shook, but my resolve didn't. I just didn't expect the fallout to happen so fast. My apartment door had barely clicked shut when the pounding started. A fist like a hammer. Then my father's voice, booming with outrage he believed he deserved. "Caroline, open this door right now!" My heart lunged into my throat. I stepped to the peephole. My father's face filled the glass, flushed, angry. Behind him, my mother clutched her sweater as if she were the victim of something unspeakable. My brother looked annoyed, scrolling his phone like this was an inconvenience, not a confrontation. "Care, sweetheart," my mother called, her voice a trembling performance. "We need to talk. It's important." My phone rang. My landlord. "They're demanding access to your unit," she said. "Do you want police involvement?" My answer came before fear could swallow it. "Yes, please call." My father heard the word through the door. His voice sharpened. "Police? On your own family?" But the word family didn't mean the same thing anymore. Officers arrived minutes later, their presence filling the hallway with echoing authority. The scene dissolved into a swirl of arguments, my parents insisting it was a misunderstanding, Mason claiming they just needed to grab a few things. They weren't allowed inside. The officers made that clear. Still, their words clung to my skin long after they were escorted away like smoke I couldn't scrub off. The next morning, I walked into Carmen's office carrying everything that had been used to trap me. She sorted the documents with a precision that steadied my breath. When she finished, she closed the folder and looked at me with a calm, resolute finality. "This is enough, Caroline. We can move forward." A restraining order was filed and granted. My account secured. Credit frozen. For the first time in my life, I had boundaries. Real ones, legal ones, not built on guilt, but on truth. And then the unexpected arrived. An email from Portland, a job offer, a promotion, a chance to step into a version of my life untouched by their hands. I accepted before doubt could return to claim me. Packing was less like preparing to leave, and more like unraveling the last threads of a life I'd outgrown. With the help of a friend, Tessa, I boxed the remnants of all the years I'd tried to be enough. When the movers took the last of my things, the apartment felt strangely hollow, not with loss but with possibility. As the plane lifted off toward Oregon, I watched Connecticut shrink into patches of color. A life I'd once believed I owed something to grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared beneath the clouds. But even then, especially then, I had no idea what waited on the other side. And I had no way of knowing just how far my family would go to drag me back. The first time I walked into my new office in Portland, I felt something I couldn't name, quiet, maybe, or safety disguised as normalcy. No one there knew my history, the weight I'd carried, or the version of myself I had left behind in Connecticut. My work was valued, my boundaries respected, and the city felt like a place that held its breath rather than demanded mine. I'm Caroline Hart, 28 years old, and for the first time in my life, I was starting over on ground that actually held me. My apartment overlooked the soft glow of the riverfront. My coworkers asked about my day without expecting anything in return. I learned how silence could feel comforting instead of weaponized. Healing didn't come in sweeping moments, it came in the slow thaw of waking up without dread. Months passed before I spoke the full truth to anyone. Not because I was ashamed, but because saying it out loud meant acknowledging how deep the wounds went. Still, when the invitation came, a regional business conference asking me to speak about financial stability and personal empowerment, I hesitated. The idea of standing in front of hundreds felt impossible. Carmen, my lawyer who had become something like a lighthouse, simply said, "Your story could save someone who thinks they're alone." That was the moment I said yes. The ballroom was massive, rows of chairs stretching like ripples, a stage washed in soft amber lighting. Backstage, I smoothed the front of my blazer, fingers trembling against the fabric. When I stepped out, applause rose, warm and polite, nothing like the hollow clapping from my graduation. These people didn't know me, yet they were ready to listen. I adjusted the microphone and began. "Thank you for having me. Today I want to talk about..." A loud crash cut through the room. At first, I thought someone had dropped a glass or knocked over equipment. Then a voice broke through, a voice I'd spent my entire adulthood trying to outrun. "That's our daughter." My father's shout tore across the ballroom. My breath locked in my chest. The doors at the back burst open, and my family surged in like a storm that had waited months to find me. My father's face was red with self-righteous fury. My mother clutched her chest as though she were the one betrayed. My brother, always the opportunist, held his phone up, recording everything like he was capturing evidence of his own victimhood. "She abandoned us," my father bellowed. "Ran off and left her family with nothing." The audience stiffened. Murmurs rose. Some people lifted their phones, unsure whether this was real or staged. "Caroline," my mother cried, voice trembling in the way she knew would draw sympathy. "Please, sweetheart, you're tearing this family apart." My fingers curled around the edge of the podium until my knuckles ached. Every instinct I'd learned from childhood told me to shrink, apologize, smooth it over, take the blame just to make it stop. But I wasn't that version of myself anymore. My voice, when it came, was steady. "Security," I said into the microphone. "They are in violation of a court order. Please remove them." Silence fell so fast it felt like the air had changed. Security guards moved through the aisles. My father roared with outrage. My mother gasped as though I'd physically struck her. Mason stepped forward, phone still up, and sneered. "Tell them how you froze our accounts. Tell them how heartless you are. I didn't flinch. I met his eyes, the same eyes that had looked at me for years like I existed to solve his chaos, and said the truth, the whole truth. Before I could swallow it back, I protected myself. From all of you. Gasps rippled through the room. And then, cutting through the tension like a blade, Douglas Hart and Mason Hart. A detective stood in the ballroom doorway, badge flashing under the lights. We have warrants for financial fraud and identity misuse. Step forward, please. The room erupted into whispers. Chairs creaked as people leaned forward. My father sputtered outrage, insisting it was a misunderstanding. My mother insisting they were being humiliated for nothing, but the detective didn't hesitate. Family doesn't excuse criminal behavior. Officers moved in, cuffed them. Mason tried to protest, but the phone recording everything only sealed the truth. My mother lunged toward me in a last desperate attempt, fingers curling like she could physically pull me back into the life I'd escaped. "Caroline, stop this! We need you!" I stepped back. She froze, her expression crumbling not from remorse, but from fear of losing her lifeline. "You needed my credit," I said quietly. "You needed my silence. You never needed me." The officers escorted them out. Doors closed behind them. Silence flooded the space in their absence, a silence that didn't feel empty, but clean. Hundreds of eyes turned to me, not with pity, with something closer to respect. I inhaled, stepped forward, and began again. "My talk today was supposed to cover budgeting techniques," I said, voice steady. "But maybe what we really need to discuss is this. What happens when the greatest threat to your financial stability comes from the people you love, and what it takes to walk away?" No one shifted. No one looked at their phones. Every person in that room listened. I told them everything: the empty seats at my graduation, the cold wind in the parking lot, the retreat where I first allowed myself to breathe, the stolen credit, the confrontation at my apartment, the slow rebuilding of a life after the truth shattered the old one. When I finished, the applause rose, not hesitant but thunderous, like a wave I hadn't known was coming. Afterward, people lined up to thank me, to tell me their own stories, to say they finally understood they weren't alone. Something inside me, something I had buried under years of survival, lifted its head and exhaled. The investigation unfolded quickly after the warrants. Patterns of fraud, signatures forged, accounts opened without consent. Every page of evidence was both painful and freeing. The court upheld the restraining order permanently. My credit was restored piece by piece. My future finally belonged to me. Portland grew roots under my feet. My office walls slowly filled with reminders of the life I was building. Photos with coworkers who felt like family in the way family should have been. A plant from Tessa I miraculously kept alive. And finally, my framed diploma. Hung not for them, but for myself. Some nights the old guilt still whispered, but now it faded quickly, drowned out by something steadier. The truth that I had saved myself long before anyone else could. Standing backstage at my next speaking event, I looked out at rows of faces, waiting people who chose to be there, who showed up without being asked. I touched the edge of my note cards and felt clarity settle over me like warm light. Choosing myself hadn't destroyed my life. It had rebuilt it. And if anyone out there needed permission to let go of a love that only took, maybe my story could be the first crack of light in their darkness, the sign that there is life on the other side of walking away. The kind that finally, mercifully, looks back at you.